Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a dark forest. The path ahead is shrouded in fog, filled with unknown dangers. This journey is your life, your personal path to becoming whole. And just when you need all your strength and focus, someone appears beside you, pulling at your arm, trying to drag you off your path. A friend, a family member, someone you've trusted, but their request feels like a weight too heavy to carry. There's a moment when you feel it in your gut, that uncomfortable tension when someone is asking for something that threatens your inner peace. Carl Jung, one of history's greatest psychologists, spent his life understanding these invisible forces that shape our relationships. And he discovered something critical. Some requests aren't just inconvenient, they're toxic to your psychological well-being. Let's be honest, at this stage of your life, you've earned the right to protect your peace. You're not here to be pulled into everyone else's darkness. You're not responsible for fixing others while breaking yourself in the process. This is your journey of individuation, as Jung would call it, not theirs. Have you ever felt like your kindness has become a weakness that others exploit? Like a psychic vampire is draining your energy while giving nothing in return? Jung would tell you this isn't accidental. It's a pattern. A dangerous dance where your authentic self gets lost in the shadows of others' demands. In this video, we'll explore 5 things that Jung would warn you about. 5 requests that signal it's time to create distance. Because anything that disrupts your path to wholeness simply isn't worth it. So stay with us until the end. This might be the message you need to reclaim the journey that belongs to you and you alone. How many times have you found yourself absorbing someone else's emotional chaos? Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. Their problems become your responsibility. Their inner demons become your battle to fight. Jung called this projection the unconscious transfer of psychological material from one person to another. It begins innocently enough. Someone shares their struggles, seeking your wisdom, your shoulder to lean on. But before you know it, you've become the container for everything they refuse to face within themselves. Think about what happens when you continue carrying weight that isn't yours. The burden doesn't lighten, it compounds. Your own psychological space becomes contaminated with foreign emotions, foreign fears. Jung would tell you that by carrying others' psychological burdens, you're not only hindering their growth, but sacrificing your own individuation. The most painful part? This pattern often emerges with those closest to you. A child who never learned to face their own shadow. A sibling who makes their emotional regulation your responsibility. A friend whose crises always somehow become yours to solve. What begins as compassion slowly transforms into psychological bondage. You become the designated emotional caretaker, the midnight therapist, the constant validator. And when you try to step back, they respond with guilt, anger, or manipulation, as if your boundaries are a personal attack on them. But here's what Jung discovered through decades of clinical work. We cannot integrate someone else's shadow. We cannot walk someone else's path to wholeness. The attempt to do so doesn't lead to healing. It leads to resentment, exhaustion, and a profound loss of self. The truth is painful, but necessary. When someone consistently makes their psychological state your responsibility, they're not seeking growth. They're seeking a host, and you are not meant to be anyone's psychological life support system. Jung would tell you that true compassion sometimes means stepping back. It means recognizing that your willingness to carry others' burdens often prevents them from developing the strength to carry their own. By continuously rescuing someone from their inner work, you're actually interfering with their individuation process. Your psychological energy is precious and finite. At this stage of life, it should be directed toward your own integration, toward reconciling your own conscious and unconscious mind. Anyone who repeatedly pulls you away from this essential work is not supporting your growth. They're impeding it. So the next time someone tries to make their inner chaos your responsibility, remember Jung's wisdom about individuation. Each of us must ultimately face our own shadow. Each of us must walk our own path. You can walk beside someone for a time, but you cannot walk for them. And anyone who asks you to do so is asking for something that will harm you both. Picture this. You're enjoying a moment of peace, reflecting on the life you've built through years of hard work and careful choices. Then your phone lights up. It's someone you care about, someone who knows your generosity, someone who has come to see you as their financial safety net. Jung understood something profound about money. It's never just about currency. Money represents security, freedom, and power. It's tied to our most primal instincts for survival. When someone asks for your financial resources, they're asking for more than dollars and cents. They're asking for a piece of your security, your peace of mind. What begins as a temporary loan slowly transforms into a pattern of dependency. Each time you say yes, you reinforce the psychological dynamic. You become the provider, they become the recipient. Jung would recognize this immediately as an archetypal relationship. The great mother or father who provides without limit, and the eternal child who never learns self-sufficiency. The danger here isn't just financial, it's psychological. By repeatedly rescuing someone from financial consequences, you prevent them from integrating an essential part of adult life. You become an enabler in their ongoing refusal to face reality. And in doing so, you sacrifice resources that should be protecting your own future. The most insidious part, the emotional manipulation that often accompanies these requests. If you really loved me, you would help. Remember everything I've done for you. These are not appeals to generosity. They're attempts to exploit your deepest attachments, your sense of obligation, your fear of rejection. Jung would point out that these patterns reveal a shadow at work, not just in the person asking, but potentially in yourself. Perhaps there's a part of you that needs to be needed, that finds identity in rescuing others, that fears what might happen if you finally say no. But here's the truth. Financial boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary. They protect not just your material resources, but your psychological ones as well. Because once your security is compromised, your capacity for growth, for joy, for peace is diminished. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot build your inner life while your outer one is crumbling. At this stage of your journey, financial stability isn't a luxury. It's the foundation that supports everything else. Anyone who repeatedly threatens that foundation is asking you to sacrifice your future for their present. And that is a price far too high to pay. If you've been finding value in these insights, we would love for you to join our community. Consider subscribing to our channel for more wisdom that helps you protect your peace and live authentically. Now, let's get back to Jung's crucial insights. Imagine the scene. A family gathering that should be filled with connections suddenly becomes a battlefield, and there you are, being pulled aside by one relative who whispers, "You need to talk to them, they'll listen to you." Suddenly, you're thrust into the center of a conflict that has nothing to do with you. Jung recognized these family dynamics as powerful constellations of psychological energy. Each family creates its own unconscious system, its own patterns of interaction that often repeat across generations. And within this system, certain roles emerge: the peacemaker, the scapegoat, the golden child, the mediator. Being asked to step into the middle of others' conflicts isn't just uncomfortable, it's psychologically damaging. When you allow yourself to become the triangulation point between warring parties, you absorb the toxic emotions that neither side is willing to address directly. You become the container for their unresolved shadow material. The request often comes disguised as a compliment. "You're so good at talking to her. Dad always listens to you. You're the only one who can fix this." But what appears to be recognition of your wisdom is actually an abdication of responsibility. their responsibility to address their own conflicts, to do their own psychological work. The most painful scenario might be watching your adult children fight over inheritance or family matters, turning what should be your legacy of love into a source of bitter division. As you attempt to mediate, to restore peace, you find yourself caught in crossfire that drains your energy and threatens your well-being. Jung would tell you that these family dramas often reflect much older, deeper patterns, archetypal conflicts playing out through modern relationships, the rivalries, the power struggles, the unspoken resentments. All of these have roots that go beyond the individuals involved, and by stepping into the middle, you're not resolving the pattern, you're becoming part of it. The truth is stark but necessary. You cannot heal family wounds that others refuse to acknowledge. You cannot create harmony between people who are committed to their conflict. And every moment spent trying to manage others' emotional battlefields is a moment taken from your own path to wholeness. Your peace at this stage of life isn't optional, it's essential. The energy you waste on unwinnable family dramas is energy diverted from your own integration process. Jung would urge you to recognize when you're being drawn into triangulation and to have the courage to step back, to say, "This is between you and them. I love you both, but I cannot be in the middle." Because in the end, true family healing doesn't come from someone playing mediator. It comes from each person doing their own inner work, facing their own shadow, taking responsibility for their own emotions. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to interfere with that necessary process. What happens when someone looks at you, the real you, with all your quirks, preferences, and hard-won wisdom, and decides that you need an upgrade? When your child tells you your clothes are too old-fashioned, or a friend suggests your opinions are outdated, or someone close to you implies that your way of being in the world is somehow wrong. Jung spent his life studying the journey toward authenticity, what he called the process of individuation. This lifelong path of integrating all parts of yourself, both light and shadow, is the central work of a meaningful life. And now, after decades of experience, of shedding false personas and discovering your true nature, someone wants you to put on a new mask. The request might seem small. Why do you still listen to that old music? Do you have to tell that story again? Can't you be more like everyone else? But what they're really asking is monumental. They're asking you to abandon the self you've worked so hard to become. Jung would recognize this immediately as a profound violation, not just of your preferences, but of your psychological integrity. Your authentic self isn't something superficial to be reshaped for others' comfort. It's the result of a lifetime of growth, of facing challenges, of integrating experiences both painful and joyful. What makes these requests so damaging is that they strike at your very core, at your sense of identity and worth. They suggest that who you naturally are isn't good enough, that your value depends on conforming to someone else's expectations. This is what Jung would call an assault on the self, the center of your psyche, the source of your wholeness. The most painful part. These demands often come from those closest to you, those who claim to love you. But Jung would tell you that true love never requires the dissolution of authenticity. True connection never asks you to become someone you're not. At this stage of your journey, you've earned the right to be fully yourself, to speak your truth, to honor your preferences, to live according to your own inner wisdom. Anyone who asks you to dim your light, to silence your voice, to reshape your being for their comfort is asking for something that would harm your soul. Because here's what Jung discovered through his work with countless individuals. Authenticity isn't selfish, it's necessary. When you honor your true nature, you bring something irreplaceable to the world. You offer the gift that only you can give, and anyone who cannot appreciate that gift doesn't deserve its power. So the next time someone suggests you should change who you are, remember Jung's wisdom about individuation. The journey to wholeness isn't about becoming what others want. It's about becoming who you truly are. And that journey is sacred, worthy of protection, worthy of respect. Have you ever felt the invisible weight of someone else's emotions hanging over you? That suffocating sense that their feelings must come first, that their emotional comfort trumps your own needs? Jung would recognize this immediately as a dangerous form of psychological entanglement, what he might call an unhealthy anima or animus projection. This is perhaps the most subtle yet destructive request of all, the expectation that you will continuously manage someone else's emotional state. It looks like, how could you say that when you know how sensitive I am? Why would you make that decision when you know it upsets me? Don't you care about how I feel? The demand comes disguised as emotional intimacy, but it's actually emotional control. It creates an impossible situation where your choices, your needs, your very existence becomes contingent on someone else's feelings. Jung would see this as a profound barrier to individuation, a psychological prison where your authentic self cannot breathe. What makes this dynamic so damaging is how it reverses the natural order of responsibility. Suddenly, you become accountable for emotions you didn't create and cannot control. Your legitimate needs are reframed as selfish demands. Your boundaries are portrayed as acts of cruelty. This is what Jung would call emotional enmeshment, a state where psychological boundaries become blurred, where the natural separation between individuals is violated. And in this blurring, both people lose. One becomes the emotional caretaker, the other remains emotionally undeveloped. The pain deepens when this dynamic emerges with adult children who never learn to regulate their own emotions, with partners who use emotional fragility as a form of control, with friends who make their happiness your responsibility. Every interaction becomes a minefield, every choice weighed against the potential emotional reaction it might provoke. Jung would tell you something profoundly important. You cannot and should not attempt to manage someone else's emotional world. Each person must develop their own relationship with their feelings, their own capacity for emotional regulation. By stepping in to continuously soothe, placate, or manage others' emotions, you're not helping, you're hindering their psychological growth. At this stage of your journey, your emotional energy is precious and finite. It should be directed toward your own integration, toward reconciling your own feelings, needs, and experiences. Anyone who consistently demands that their emotions take precedence over your well-being is asking for something fundamentally unhealthy. Because the truth is this: emotional responsibility is not transferable. We each must learn to hold our own feelings, to process our own reactions, to find our own equilibrium. And when someone refuses this essential work, instead making their emotional stability your job, they're not expressing love, they're expressing dependency. So the next time someone expects you to sacrifice your needs for their emotional comfort, remember Jung's wisdom about psychological boundaries. True connection doesn't require enmeshment. True love doesn't demand emotional self-erasure. And anyone who suggests otherwise is asking for something that would diminish you both. We've journeyed through the warning signs that Jung would urge you to recognize. 5 requests that signal it's time to create distance, to protect your psychological integrity. These aren't minor inconveniences. They're serious threats to your path of individuation, to your journey toward wholeness. Jung understood something profound, that each of us has one life, one precious opportunity to become fully ourselves. And this journey requires space, requires boundaries, requires the courage to say no to those who would pull us from our path. Remember, when someone asks you to carry their psychological burdens, to sacrifice your financial security, to mediate their conflicts, to change your authentic self, or to prioritize their feelings above your own needs, they're not just asking for your time or energy. They're asking for pieces of your soul. At this stage of life, you've earned the right to protect what you've built. Not just materially, but psychologically. You've earned the right to continue your journey of individuation without unnecessary burdens, without toxic entanglements. Jung would tell you that there's nothing selfish about this protection. In fact, it's an act of profound self-respect and, ultimately, an act of love. Because by honoring your own boundaries, you create the space for genuine connection, for relationships based on mutual growth rather than dependency or control. So I ask you, which of these 5 warnings resonated most deeply with you? Have you experienced these dynamics in your own relationships? What boundaries have you created to protect your path? Leave your thoughts in the comments below with the keyword individuation so I can highlight your insights in our next video. Your journey matters, and your wisdom might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Jung's wisdom. Until next time, protect your peace, honor your path, and remember that the journey to wholeness is yours alone to walk.